He used to bring me flowers. That's where the story begins, I think. With flowers and the quiet, hopeful belief that love, once found, is safe. I met him in early spring, when the air still held a trace of winter. We were both standing in line at a small cafe near my office, a place that smelled faintly of roasted coffee beans and warm bread. I remember that he smiled first. Not broadly, not in a forced way, just a gentle upward curve, as if he recognized something in me before we had even spoken. He asked if I came there often. The line was slow, so we talked. I told him about my work, my daily routines, the small details of a life lived quietly. He listened, really listened, turning his full attention toward me in a way that made everything else, the clatter of dishes and soft music, fade into the background. When we left the cafe, he walked me halfway back to my office. He didn't ask for my number right away. He didn't rush. He simply said, "I'd like to see you again," as though it were the most natural thing in the world, and I, without hesitation, said yes. The early months were gentle and warm. Like stepping into sunlight after a long season of cold. He brought me flowers every Friday. Sometimes roses, sometimes wildflowers from a roadside stall, sometimes a single white lily wrapped in brown paper. I remember the way my chest felt each time I opened the door and saw him holding them, the way his eyes flickered with that quiet certainty. He gave thoughtful gifts, too, not expensive things, but things that showed he noticed me. A small book of poems after I mentioned liking one line. A scarf the exact shade of blue I once said reminded me of the sea. A small jar of honey from a weekend market because I had once complained my tea tasted too bitter. He was attentive, present, soft-spoken, but sure, when he laughed, he leaned slightly forward, as though laughter was something to share, not release. Even now, remembering those days, I feel something like grief, not for him, but for the version of myself who believed that gentleness meant permanence. We spent time together in quiet ways, cooking simple meals, walking along the riverbank, sitting on my balcony, listening to distant street noise while the sun dipped behind the rooftops. I began to imagine a future, not in dramatic cinematic images, but in small, everyday moments that stretch forward: morning coffee, shared grocery lists, someone to lean against at the end of long days. I think that's what love really is. Not fireworks, not grand gestures, just steady presence. And for a while, that's what we had. But love, I have learned, is not always about who someone is at the beginning. It is revealed in who they become when faced with choice. The change came slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. He stopped bringing flowers every week, not entirely, just less frequently. He began to check his phone more during our conversations. Little pauses, delayed replies, moments where his thoughts seemed to drift somewhere I could not follow. "It's just work," he said once. I believed him, until I didn't. There was a trip. A short business trip, he said. A conference, 3 days in another city. When he returned, he was different in a way that felt both subtle and undeniable. Not withdrawn exactly, but softer in his attention, as though his focus had shifted slightly to something invisible. He still kissed me, still held me, still lay beside me at night, but something in the silence between us felt altered. I tried not to worry. I told myself love changes, that relationships evolve. I didn't want to cling. I didn't want to be insecure. I didn't want to become someone I wouldn't want to be. So I stayed calm. I watched. I waited. And then, one evening, as we sat across from each other at the small wooden table in my kitchen, he said her name for the first time. May, just casually, almost carelessly, as if she were someone I already knew. But that was only the beginning. He mentioned her as if she were simply part of the story of his day, a new colleague, someone he had met during the business trip. He said she was working with one of the partner teams. He said she was interesting, in that thoughtful tone he used when describing something delicate, something worth attention. I nodded. I asked a polite question. I listened, but something in my chest tightened very quietly. It wasn't jealousy, not at first. It was the awareness that a door I had never seen before had just opened. A door leading somewhere I was not invited. He spoke about her a few more times over the next weeks, casually. In passing, about her accent, about her laughter, about how she saw the world differently, about how she had told him stories of her hometown, of red lanterns glowing above markets, of streets filled with the smell of steamed buns and jasmine tea. He spoke the way he had once spoken about me, and I realized something I didn't want to realize. He was beginning to admire her. The first real fracture happened on a Saturday. We had planned to cook together, a simple meal, pasta with basil and garlic, something we'd made dozens of times. I waited for him in my kitchen, chopping tomatoes, the window open to the sound of distant traffic. He texted, "Running late, something came up." No explanation, no apology. I continued cooking, assuming he would arrive soon. When he came, nearly 2 hours later, he looked distant. His shirt smelled faintly of cigarette smoke. He didn't smoke, but she did. I knew because he had mentioned it once, laughing at how she would lean halfway out the window so the manager wouldn't notice. "Were you with her?" I asked softly, without accusation. Without fear, he paused. A pause long enough to be answer enough. "Yes," he finally said. "But we were just talking," I nodded. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I didn't ask why he hadn't told me. I simply placed the knife down, slowly, carefully, as though I were handling something fragile. It was not the talking that hurt. It was the choice to hide it. I tried to believe him. I told myself that trust meant choosing not to imagine worst-case scenarios. I told myself that insecurity could become a self-fulfilling wound. But something had shifted. He stopped looking directly at me when we spoke. He held his phone a little closer. He smiled to himself at messages he didn't explain. He began to spend more time at the office. Love does not disappear suddenly. It erodes like stone underwater, slowly, silently, grain by grain. The final confirmation was not dramatic. There was no shouting, no confrontation, just clarity one evening. He left his laptop open on my desk. Not intentionally, not carelessly. Simply forgetting that I was in the room, a message window was open. Her name, May, a conversation. I read only one line, just one, before I closed the screen, because that was all I needed. "I think I love the way you see me." It was not a declaration of love. It was something worse. It was confession. It was the admission that with her, he felt like someone he preferred being. When he returned to the room, I didn't ask why. I just said very quietly, "When did you decide to leave us? Before you realized it or after?" He froze, not guilty, not ashamed. Just caught. There is a difference. He sat down across from me, his hands clasped, his voice steady. "I didn't plan for this," he said. "I didn't expect her. I didn't expect to feel something new." He said it softly, the way someone explains rain falling, not dramatic. Not cruel, just a fact of the world. I nodded because I understood now. Love is not always lost to something better. Sometimes it is lost to something new, and that is a different kind of heartbreak. He didn't ask forgiveness. He didn't ask me to fight for him. He didn't ask me to stay. He had already made his choice. I did not cry. Not then. I walked to the sink. I washed the knife. I rinsed the cutting board. I placed everything where it belonged. He watched me, unsure whether he should speak. When I finished, I dried my hands on a towel and looked at him, really looked, for the first time in weeks. "You were the one who taught me what steady love felt like," I said. "And now you are the one teaching me how something steady can break." He closed his eyes. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "and I believe that too. Just because someone hurts you does not mean they wanted to, but apology does not undo the change." He left that night, not dramatically, not slamming the door, just quietly, the way a season ends. What happened after? The unraveling, the questioning, the rebuilding came slowly. And that is where the real story begins. Because losing someone is one thing, but losing the version of yourself that existed with them, that is the real grief, and what happened next changed everything. At first, the change was almost invisible. He didn't stop talking to me. He didn't break anything directly, but something in the way he looked at me had shifted. Just slightly enough that I could feel it, but not enough to name it. He started replying slower. He stopped asking how my day was. Our conversations became shorter, lighter, like small talk between two people who used to be close. I kept telling myself he was just busy, tired, stressed. I tried not to overthink it, but then came the moment that told me everything. We were out walking one evening. Just a normal walk, something we always did. And the whole time he kept his phone in his hand, screen lighting up over and over. Not with work emails, not with friends, it was different. The kind of focused, warm attention you give when you're excited about someone new. So I asked, "Are you sure everything's okay?" He didn't look angry, he didn't act guilty, he just looked away. "Yeah, just tired, don't worry," and I wanted to believe him. I really did. But eventually, I found out he had met someone online, a woman from China. At first, they just talked. Then the conversations got longer, deeper, more personal. The kind you have when you're building something emotional. Something real, and that was the part that hurt most. It wasn't that he left. It was that he stayed just long enough to make me feel like I was losing him slowly, piece by piece, while he was already giving those pieces to someone else. The way I finally found out was almost anticlimactic. He left his laptop open on the table one morning. Not wide open, just enough that the screen didn't lock yet. A message notification popped up. I didn't go looking for it. I didn't scroll. I didn't need to. Her name, a small heart emoji next to it, and a line from their chat still visible. "I wish I could fall asleep next to you soon." I didn't cry. My heart didn't drop. It was like something very old inside me had already known and was simply nodding. He walked into the room a moment later, saw where my eyes were looking, and for a second, just one, he looked afraid, not of losing me, but of being seen. I remember asking him quietly, How long? He sat down, rubbed his palm across his face, avoided eye contact the way guilty people do. I didn't mean for this to happen. We were just talking at first. She understands me in ways I didn't need to hear the rest. It was strange how calm I felt, like the part of me that used to panic or cling had finally stepped aside. I simply said, "Okay." He looked confused. "That's it, just okay?" And I nodded. "Yes, I won't fight for someone who has already left." He opened his mouth, probably to say something comforting, something careful, the kind of words people use to make themselves feel less cruel. But I stood up, walked into the bedroom, started folding my clothes, not angrily, not rushing, just doing what needed to be done. He followed me, saying my name as if it could change the outcome, as if speaking it kindly now erased the weeks of silence. I didn't argue. I didn't explain. I didn't accuse him. I had loved him. He had chosen someone else. That was the full story. I packed in less than an hour. When I closed the suitcase, I finally looked at him. He looked smaller than before, fragile, lost in his own choices. And I said, "You don't have to apologize. I just hope you treat her better than you treated us. No bitterness, no sarcasm, just truth." Then I walked out. But that wasn't the end. Leaving was only the beginning of learning how to live without him. And without the version of myself that depended on being chosen. What came next changed everything in the first weeks after I left. I felt strangely steady, not happy, not relieved, just quiet. I rented a small studio on the edge of the city, one room, white walls, a window that looked out onto nothing remarkable, just the back of a supermarket and a parking lot. But it was mine, a place where no one compared me to someone else. I kept myself busy, work, groceries, laundry, walks with headphones in. The kind of routine that fills time but not the heart. But late at night, the reality of everything would settle over me like heavy air. Not grief. Grief happens when you lose something you wanted. This was different. It was the realization that I had spent so much time trying to be enough for someone who had already checked out long before I noticed. And that was what hurt. Not him, not her, not the ending, the effort, the trying, the ways I bent myself without seeing it. I remember one night specifically, I was making tea, jasmine, the kind he used to bring home because he thought it tasted like spring. The kettle clicked, I poured the water, the steam rose, and suddenly I just started crying, not loudly, just tears slipping down my face like they had been waiting for the right silence, because I finally understood. I had loved him in the way a child reaches for sunlight, open, hopeful, sure of warmth, but he had loved me like a hobby, something to pick up and put down depending on the day. Once that truth settled in my bones, something in me changed, not into bitterness, not into anger. Into clarity. A few months passed before he reached out. The message came late in the evening. "Hey, I've been thinking about you. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a long moment before typing back. "About what?" He replied quickly, like he had been waiting. "About us. About everything." I could have ignored him, but I didn't. We met in a small cafe. He arrived looking tired. Not physically, but tired in the way of someone who doesn't like the consequences of their own choices. He talked first about how things with her were not what he expected, how distance was hard, how they misunderstood each other, how he sometimes missed the simplicity and safety of what we had. He said it like he was reminiscing about an apartment he once lived in, comfortable, familiar, easy. I listened, the way you listen to rain without reacting, just letting sound exist. When he finished, he finally asked, "Did you ever wonder if we could try again?" I looked at him, really looked, for the first time since everything fell apart. And I saw him clearly, not the man I loved, not the man who left, just a person who didn't know what he wanted, who reached for what felt good in the moment, who mistook attention for affection. I felt no anger, no jealousy, no longing, just truth, so I said, "No, I didn't wonder." He blinked, surprised, as if he thought love waited in a box somewhere, ready to be reopened. I went on, "You didn't choose her instead of me, you chose yourself, and now I'm choosing myself too." He didn't argue, he just nodded, slowly, like a person who finally hears something they should have known all along. We said goodbye, quietly, without drama. I walked home through cool air, hands in my pockets, heart steady. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt free. The moral is simple. Some people love you only when you're convenient. Some love you only when you don't require effort. Some love the idea of you, not the reality, and the strongest choice you can make, the one that changes everything, is to walk away with your dignity intact, without asking to be chosen. Because love is not proven by fighting to stay. Sometimes, love is proven by knowing when to leave.